What's up, brother?
Finding you.
Hey, man.
Exhausted, no?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, no, not yet. I'm about to take a break
Okay.
and go hit the water.
Yeah.
You're gonna see.
Yeah.
I wanted to tap in with you real quick before tomorrow. You know, we'll be having the other conference model coming in. Hey, Adrian.
Hey, Donna.
Doing good?
I'm great. Everybody's like, Adrian, you look tired. So I had to come in and say, I'm great. Everything's fine.
I don't think you look tired at all.
Thank you.
Do I look tired?
No.
I just look hot, but all of us do.
Exactly.
I got good energy.
Where's Ruben?
You're all good and set to go whenever you're ready.
Yeah. Okay. Here's her topic. Okay.
Let me see. Hold on, Adrian. Beachside chat with Bozoma saying, okay. Yeah.
Okay, there you go.
Good topic.
Okay, so we want to go? You ready? Is there a special workshop? Am I schedule is that okay?
Yes.
How
One
was your
second.
previous one?
Right now?
Yeah.
The conference.
And I think for tomorrow, where it's just one slide, we'll just do the time. I'll tell you each time. We'll do the countdown. 5-0.
Adrian.
No. Oh,
5 minutes.
no. 50.
50
5-0.
minutes. Okay,
Yeah.
okay, all right.
Yes.
But they won't see. They have nothing to see.
The conference call?
Yeah.
What?
No, they
Oh,
have
exactly.
they have
Exactly.
nothing. Yeah.
That's why it's good to
They
just...
don't need to. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Starting now.
Did Adrian want an intro? She's going to do it. She's going to do it? Okay. So let's just wait. When she starts.
Okay, 1, 2, 3. Oh, yours is on. Hello, hello, hello. We are ready. Come on down because we are ready for another disruptive panel. And we're taking this conversation global. I mean, we're already in the south of France, but let us take it to the motherland. Let us take it to Africa. I am so proud to be a part of this conversation about Ghana.
Yes.
And here to talk to me all about Ghana, we're going to we already decided we're going to cover 4 points. One on growth, one on culture, one on investment, and the next one will be on what is the forward-focused movement that we think is necessary. So if everyone will come on and gather in the tradition of sitting down while people are talking, how about that? We're going to get started. So I am here with Bozoma, and we're so excited because you've been just grateful to you, just let me say that, for participating in, this is your third Inkwell Beach Stage performance. You were here in 2019, here in 2022, and you're back with us. So please give a round of applause to Bozoma St. John for her commitment to showing up for the people, for showing up in this space.
Yes.
And so this is another, I'm going to go on a tangent, funny conversation. So back in the day, I think it was when you went really viral. I mean, you've always been viral, but when you went viral. And I think you were doing a presentation on stage, and maybe it was at Apple. And you turned on, and since this is the 50th year of hip hop,
Yes.
you played, was it to the hip?
Rapper's Delight.
Rapper's Delight.
Yeah.
The Rapper's Delight. And I was like, who is that woman bringing the culture, bringing her most authentic self and sharing the culture with the people? And I think that sort of transformed sort of that community of the world, because you just blew up Twitter that time. Do you remember that? Like, what was the inspiration during that time?
Well, I mean, look, the incredible thing about that moment was that I was, of course, in charge of presenting Apple Music for the wide audience. We hadn't done it successfully before. We had tried once before, and it failed miserably. So it was a lot of pressure to make sure that we presented the product in a way that would make people want to participate and buy and subscribe and all of that. So there was a lot of pressure on it. But I realized that the only way to make it stick, you know, to make people remember it, was to make it personal.
Yes.
And I think sometimes that's a counterintuitive thing, right? You think that, oh, I have to make it feel like everybody can participate or everybody can identify, and it actually waters it down. It makes it boring.
Yeah.
And so when you put yourself into the work, that's actually what makes it that much more interesting to people. And so yes, my decision was that I wasn't going to go with the most popular music. I was going to go with the music that made sense to me.
Yes.
And so I chose Rapper's Delight. I chose a song by one of my play nieces, okay, because I'm that kind of auntie who was like, you want to be a rapper? Fantastic. Give me your music. I'm going to put it on Apple Music. And then I played a song from Ghana called Yewo Krum, which at that time was called hip life. We didn't even have the term Afro beats yet as a popular way to describe the music, and there was no playlist, there was nothing like that on Spotify, Tidal, or anything else. And so that moment transformed the way that we were interacting with music. And so yes, I brought my full self, my full Ghanaian and American self.
It was just a powerful moment. Does anybody remember that moment when it just was like circling out everywhere? Yes, the applause. He's like, yes, I remember. Because we were all like, hip, hop, hippie to the hippie,
Hey.
hip, a hopper, you
Oh,
don't
okay.
stop, a rocket. Okay, fine. My rap career, if you want to sign me, come on. Okay. Sam, we are so delighted. This is your day one on the Inkwell Beach stage. The expectation is that you will continuously come back and share with us everything that you have to give. You are a Ghanaian,
Yes.
born in Florida.
Yes.
And he's like, yes, I am. And so, but you are just a part of a growing community that is sort of bringing your full self, who you are as a Ghanaian, but living in America. Tell us, like, how are you showing up and bringing your most authentic self and bridging the gap, and why is it so important for you to really be touching back into your homeland, your heritage?
Well, I think the most important reason is because if I don't, like my father's sitting in the audience and he's gonna, you know, then I'm in big trouble
Happy
when I go
belated
back
Father's
to Ghana.
Day to Papa Sam.
So, right, we got to obey our parents, especially these African parents. If you know, you know. No, but seriously, every conversation when I'm talking to somebody, I ask them, you know, in the first few minutes, have you been to Ghana? And Boz does the same thing, and it's creating that awareness early on. And it's crazy because I get offended when people ask me, how long is the flight, right? So if a long flight is the only reason you haven't been to Ghana yet, this is easy. We're going to get you there this December. And speaking of this past,
The sign-up sheets are
no,
at the
for
front
real,
desk. right?
December, we're going to get you there, right? No, but seriously, in this past December, you know, it's a lot of conversation about, you know, being African in America, but I'm telling you, it has nothing, it's nothing compared to actually being a black American actually repatriating and having a full experience back in Ghana, right? And I could write a book about my experience, and I think my first trip, I went back to Ghana, I was 13. And since then, I've lost count of how many times I've been back. But I'm just telling you, the experience of being a cultured black man, right, who grew up in the South, listened to Rick Ross and Plies and all those guys, and now I'm in Ghana learning Afro beats instead of the other way around. It's just a beautiful experience. But back to my original comment, it's just creating awareness in the conversation very early, and holding people accountable, right? You say you love Africa. You say you know you're a black enthusiast. Well, why, when you get 2 weeks off from work, you taking your ass to the Caribbean, right? When you can grow across the Atlantic and have a more fruitful and fulfilling experience back home.
I love it. So let me just do a quick poll of the audience. How many people in the audience have actually been to Ghana or been back to Africa, period? Oh.
Okay.
So wait, to Ghana or to Africa? Oh, did y'all recruit the whole audience? I mean, the cards are stacked here, and everybody's like me. So I'm the only one. I'm like, well, no. But I have been to the motherland, though. I've been to Senegal. I've been to Morocco. And I was saying I went to Egypt. So I went way back to the pyramids. So, all right. Okay. So if we talk about sort of when people think and they ask the question, there are a lot of misconceptions. Number one, about Africa. You know, Ghana, let's be specific. Like, what are some of the growth opportunities? Because people want to learn, you know, figure out what's in it for me. What should I know? is there an opportunity for dual citizenship, especially everything that's happening in America, we want to get out. So tell me, give me some growth opportunities, sectors that we should be looking for when we're thinking about going home.
Well, the thing is that, like, as Sam said, you know, there's so much opportunity, not just from a tourism standpoint, but to really get invested into what is happening. Now, here's the thing. When I was growing up, you know, one of the big insults, if you were black, people would say, you know, go back to where you came from, right? It is not as insulting now when I think about that, right?
Okay, can you buy me a flight? I'll be...
Hold on, Delta. Let me find a flight, you know? The thing is that we don't have to be afraid of the investment, which is not just about your money, but about your time, your creativity, your excitement. You know, so even as Sam said, it's like, look, in the first 5 minutes of the conversation with me, I'm going to ask you whether or not you're coming back with me. You know, because I'm excited about the opportunities. That's an investment of my time onto the continent and into the culture. And so the growth is really an opportunity for all of us to make ourselves that much more aware of what is happening. One of the things I heard that made me most excited about the growth of our cultural visibility as black people was when the current president of Ghana said, until the continent of Africa is respected, no person of African descent anywhere will be respected. And I found that to be so powerful because we're all struggling, you're right, we're all struggling with obviously racism, identity, challenges in our own fractured communities, the diaspora that feels like, oh, if you're from Jamaica or you're from Grenada or you're from Louisiana or you're from Kenya, that somehow our plights are different. And I recognize that we're not a monolithic group, but the truth of the matter is that we do descend from the same continent. And until we are empowered enough to understand the investment of all of our creative energies are actually what's going to empower the continent to be that much richer, we are not going to be respected anywhere, and not in the south of France either. So it is up to all of us to invest our own personal time, and that's what I interpret as growth.
How about you, Sam?
That was good. That was good. That's for real. When I guess my response to someone asking, you know, well, what can I get out of it? What's in it for me is kind of an individualistic mindset, and that's not the foundation that Africans stand on. The sacrifices that so many people before us made just so Africa is still where it is today, that wasn't due to an individualistic mindset, right? It's a family mindset and it's a community mindset. So my advice to somebody who wants to repatriate and go back to Africa is have a community mindset. I think you'd be kind of putting the cart before the horse if you think that you're going to go on your first trip and find a business opportunity. Yeah. And I'm going to tell you why. It doesn't matter how good of a business person you are, right? There's a different culture of business in Africa, right? A lot of things are made with handshakes, and in America, it's a very litigious society. Right. Everything is about the contract. In fact, there are people who will wait and prey on you and wait for you to skip steps in contract negotiation just so they can leverage themselves on you later on down the line. But in Africa, trust is very important. Your word is very important. You have an issue, you don't send your lawyers. You go with a community of people and sit before that person and work to solve the issue. So I think the first thing, if somebody wants to do business in Africa, is to take a visit, at least one visit, to understand the culture. But from a business standpoint, where you'll have a 20-year runway if you get into those opportunities now. But from a hospitality and tourism standpoint, if you haven't heard about December in Ghana, you're truly missing out. And that month alone, right, it has its own hashtag, it has its own name, because the experience, not just from, you know, there are enough hotels to fit everybody in America. Beyond that, the restaurant, the eating experience is pretty awesome. My family also owns Treasure Island, which is a secret. It's Ghana's secret, but everybody who knows about it, they're waiting for the opportunity to come back. And you talk about tourism. There's so many investment opportunities, not just residential for you to have your own little nest, but commercial and commercial development and residential opportunities as well. Treasure Island is one of those places that is going to be waiting for you in December. It's actually situated on an island, and it's the only resort property in Ghana like itself. And just like I said, do your research because the opportunities are there. If you think now, you're going to compete. If you think long term, you'll be a trailblazer, in my opinion.
I love the concept of trailblazing and just thinking far ahead. I think, let me just ask this question. How many of you are actually from Africa versus America? So how many are from, Africa, born relatives? Okay. And how many are you not? I mean, I know in theory we're all. So, and I think and I'm asking this for a reason. Because right now there's been a movement to identify who am I, as an individual. What part of Africa am I from, right? Where do I go to connect to who I am to be that trusted, true, authentic self? So there's an advantage, I would say, to just sort of knowing who you are and connectivity. Do you find it important, or is it like for us to know that first, or is it necessary for us to? Yeah. It's not Ancestry.com. Do you know what I mean? There's a test now.
Yeah.
Yes, 23, where you can tap into where you're from. And I think sometimes that is a struggle for African Americans or American who don't know where they're from. Mm-hmm. How do I connect? Where do I go?
Yeah. This is such an important question. I've done a lot of work actually in this space. One of my first strategies when I started working on the Year of Return, this was now 7 years ago, was to help overcome that obstacle, right? Because part of the challenge is that if you feel like you don't identify, you don't have roots, you don't feel connected enough to feel responsible for the continent. Meaning that then, yes, you'll choose anywhere else to go on vacation instead of being like, oh, let me go home, right? And it became a real psychological project. And it uncovered a lot more than I anticipated because it wasn't simply about partnering with 23andMe or African Ancestry or it was far beyond that because there's some people who are like, yes, I'll do it. And there's some people who are conspiracy theorists who are like, why are they collecting my DNA? You know what I mean? And so then it was to overcome that challenge. And eventually what I came to and what we decided to go with was the idea that if you are black, if you have any blackness in you, you are from the continent of Africa, full stop, period. We don't need anybody else to tell us that we are from the continent. Who said that? Right. And on top of that, then we had to go a step further, and this is where the real, challenge happened, which was that then it was like, okay, what do we do with citizenship? Yes. So if you are not from the continent, you can't trace your roots to the continent, how do you become a citizen? If you're a citizen of the US or the UK or Brazil or someplace else, and you want to become a citizen of Ghana. And that became the next strategy. Yeah. And essentially, we had to blow the doors open on that and say that you didn't need proof that you were African in order to become a citizen of Ghana. That simply by having blackness, you belong. And so therefore, all the language that was in the citizenship applications, we struck and decided that there was now going to be a policy which would remove all barriers in terms of your DNA application.
I mean, is that not a powerful thing to say? I mean, essentially, you just show up. And there you show up. You show up and you.
And let me tell you, one of the most emotional
and really powerful,
transformative experiences for me personally was when I sat with the first class of citizens.
I remember your post. You made a post
look,
when everybody
I cried
was
every tear that day.
It was beautiful.
Man,
I remember that.
It was so beautiful to see 159 black people who stood in a room of all shades from all countries and said, I am now a citizen of Ghana simply because I'm black. It was gorgeous. So no shade to Ancestry.com or 23andMe. Those businesses are fantastic. Please support if you would like. But I'm like, you black, you belong in Africa.
I love it. What's that?
And to echo what Bozoma said, there are several countries that I know for a fact, I can't give you a list right now, but there are several countries that will allow you to start a business and gain a business certificate and also gain citizenship if you can prove that you're black. And it's not many people in this audience who I think will have an issue doing that, right? But beyond that, my experience in understanding and getting to the point where I could call Ghana home, it was different, right? Because my dad, I'd always known that my dad was a Ghanaian man. And I would travel back to Ghana and I would spend time, and he did everything in his power to show me Ghana through his eyes. And that's something that I'll never be able to let him know how much I appreciate, right? But it wasn't until I met my own tribe, people of my age, people of my interest, that I really, now I find reasons to go to Ghana. Hey, I left the light on in my room. I got to come back, you know what I'm saying? And he's looking at me like, hey, man, I know you got stuff to focus on over there in the U.S., but I'm like, nah, I got to get back, you know? But it wasn't so I can just have fun and hang out. There's something really exciting happening in our country, right? And I can tell you, there's so many Nigerian people and people from Ivory Coast that are in Ghana that if they didn't tell me they were from Nigeria, I wouldn't know, right? So at the end of the day, I don't think I can't say that it doesn't matter because I'm a little biased. I know that I'm a Ghanaian man. But at the same time, I think it's getting started and moving aside those reasons why you haven't been back. And then once you get back, it's my belief that God is going to help you find where your family is from. Again, through the word I used earlier, community. You're going to meet people. They're going to tell you, hey, I know this person, I know this person. Sooner or later, you'll find yourself in a comfortable experience where you can use the term home. And I'm going back home because now I have a reason to. You'll be able to use that more easily.
Well, I just want to contradict just one thing that Kofi said, or Sam said. I know the Nigerians, okay, when they're in Ghana. If I can spot them a mile away. Yeah, I see you, Lovey. Uh-huh. Yes, exactly. Look at you, useless person.
Uh-oh.
It's about to be a war. She don't get a mic. By the way, if there's any Q&A, please nobody give her a microphone.
So, I mean, that was going to be so similar to or related to my next question. Are there less barriers of entry in Ghana versus any other country, you think? Or
no, I don't think so.
Can I go to, Sierra Leone? Can I go to Nigeria and other countries and show up and just like, I'm black and I'm home? You know what I mean? Like.
Yeah. I think from most of the countries we probably live in, you don't need anything other than a visa, to be able to come. Well, you need vaccinations, etc. But the barrier is that similar as you would to Brazil.
I mean, even to citizenship, though. I think that's
yes.
We're focused on
yes, there are. There are definitely barriers.
Because we want to keep it real, just in case I'm asking for a friend.
Yeah.
How can I?
No, but it's a great question because even though we're talking so much about Ghana, I am a Pan-Africanist. So I believe in the continent as a whole. And so part of the strategy in what I would call, which is really a cultural test, which is what we're doing, right? What happens? Because look, all the questions were asked, by the way, in the closed door meetings is like, oh, well, who's going to apply for citizenship? We can't just let anybody in. It's like you can imagine the kind of arguments that happen. It was like, oh, no, just take all of that language out. People start saying, oh, but we don't want anybody who's, not going to contribute to our society. And I'm just like, but why would we assume that? If you're brave enough, interested enough, committed enough to say, I want to be a citizen of this country, we can probably assume that they are they come with promise and they come with good intent. Now, I'm not saying that you don't do the background check like you would do in the U.S. if, somebody wants to be a citizen of the United States, but there was specific language, i.e., in the test to become a citizen in the United States, for instance, you have to pass English proficiency, right? In Ghana, there was similar language that you had to pass proficiency in any of the local native languages. I fought to remove that piece of language.
Yes.
Because it is not possible for people who are not from the continent, who can't come and live there for 5 years to become proficient in the language. And so why would we do that?
Yeah.
You know, there is no official language. And so why would we ask that of people who want to become citizens? So that's a very long answer, but there are other stipulations, of course. Sure. And my hope is that all countries on the continent will follow that lead and allow for citizens to join the country based on their blackness and not on some other rules that become big, big barriers.
One of the difficulties that a lot of people face when getting ready to travel anywhere, but getting ready to travel anywhere is getting a visa, right? Mm-hmm. It's an extensive process, and sometimes I understand that can be a turnoff for a lot of people. So one of the good things that the Tourism Authority did this past December was lift the visa requirements, where you could do a visa on arrival, and it was $120. As opposed to going to a 2 to 4 week process back here in the U.S. where you actually have to go online and submit an app, because people are already dealing with difficulties getting their passports, right? The passport office was significantly backed up in America. So Ghana made it easy for everyone who wanted to travel in December. And I believe for 6 weeks, you didn't need a visa. All you needed to do was arrive at the airport. It was maybe a half-an-hour process, and they gave you your visa on site. Now, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was a single entry visa. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But again, that speaks to what, Africans and what countries in Africa are doing to make your experience easier to repatriate.
Yeah.
So and I'll just share this one experience of, and I think what you said, Bozoma, about just being black and how that connects us. In January, I had an opportunity to go to Davos for the World Economic Forum, and there was a meeting of a meeting called the African Group, right? About 6 Africans in the room, and the rest were non-Africans, right? But a lot of the conversation that was being had was how do other people reinvest and give back to the continent, or just supply support. And I just thought it was interesting because the way the conversation was going was as if it was a contribution being made versus charity versus number one, giving back what was stolen before. How about putting that back in? But how are we able to, in your conversations, as you talk about Ghana and people investing back into the continent, shift the narrative from this is charity to investment, right? And then the people who are there, how are you investing in to kind of level what's been taken before?
Man, you really opened the door.
Well,
and I'm about to walk right through
it. This is what we do.
No, it's such an important question because I have talked about this before, but I'll share it here, which is that one of the most shocking things to me when my family finally settled in the U.S. I was born in the United States, but we moved around a lot and then resettled in the United States when I was 12. So that's where Sam and I, our differences are in that he, returned to the continent when he was 12, when I, came to the U.S., right? The challenge that I found at the time was the charity of supporting Africa by investing in children. Right? Y'all remember those campaigns? The 1 cent a day. Some of them still run. And as marketers, advertisers, creative people, you'll understand how detrimental, how insidious that campaign was. Because what was happening is that we're saying this person's life is worth 1 cent as opposed to yours, which is worth lots and lots of money. Very, very valuable. And then I thought, it doesn't just stop at this child that you see with the flies on their eyes and distended bellies, because on your fridge you see this black face every day that has 1 cent associated with their image. So that means when they see you, you are worth 1 cent as well. There is no division. And so this idea that we are somehow different doesn't make any sense to me. And this idea that we are not united in that struggle doesn't make any sense to me. My point in saying that is that, we have to do the job of understanding the narrative that is being shared, correcting that narrative, in order to have a better sense of our community, in order for us to actually do the work that is required to lift the content up. And honestly, I'm now on this platform and I'm talking about this in such a passionate way. I actually can't remember what your question was, because I'm so passionate about the thought of this 1 cent and our value.
Fortunately, it's a fluid conversation.
Fantastic,
so.
good. Because I just wanted to say that really is what it was.
But it was really about sort of other countries feeling, people who don't look like us going into Africa
Yes.
as if it is a charitable moment.
Oh, yes. That was the charity part.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll come back to that. Because honestly, the idea of charity starts there. Thinking that you are doing somebody a favor by contributing to their life with 1 cent, right? Your throwaway money is so valuable to them that it keeps them alive.
Without understanding the richness of the culture
Correct.
that already exists.
Yes.
And how about you invest in growing the businesses
That's right.
so that
That's right.
we're creating more owners, you're
Yes.
creating more people to be able to give back to start businesses and other than that.
And that's why it was so important, again, when we started to think about this new strategy and the new way to talk about Africa, to Sam's point about tourism and hospitality, it had to be about more than just what is known, drought and famine. It was like, well, what's the richness in food? Although, shout out to Ghana Jollof, Lovey.
Yeah.
And it had to be more than just fashion. It had to be about music as well. So I'm so grateful look, I was in Atlanta a couple of weeks ago, and on the radio, it's like an Afrobeat song is every other song. I was like, oh, okay, this is what I'm talking about. Yeah. So the idea of charity is so multi-layered that if you, basically to the point you made earlier, until you respect the content, of course you're going to think it's a charity. So yeah, you go to a meeting like that and people start talking about, well, how can I give to the continent in a way that does not sound like investment? It sounds like charity. And that's what we need to turn around.
A large body of my work that I did while I was in the NFL, and partially one of the reasons why my name is notable in the world around me, was because of my work as a humanitarian. And I think my perspective on charity work changed when I was doing some type of research for a campaign we were doing, and I found out that March of Dimes, per dollar they received, they only gave 3 cents to the actual cause that they were advocating for, right? And so it showed me, right, and I also have a nonprofit myself, it showed me the business of nonprofits, right? So one of the things that we didn't realize as we were watching that commercial, because they used a advertising tactic that touched your emotion, is per 1 cent you sent them, right, there's a great chance that 90% of the money they received actually went to the organization that was advertising the commercial. So we think that, yeah, I'm giving them 1 cent, but the reality is you were only giving them 1,000th of a dollar. 1,000th of a dollar. So we have to remember that the cognitive biases that we have as people, they are shaped by our experiences, okay? Our perspective is shaped by our experiences. So if your experience in America, right, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist, this is just my opinion, if your experience in America is only summarized, right, by somebody telling you that a country or a continent has no value, okay, then you are carrying what somebody has told you and not the actual truth as your belief system, okay? So if you just go beyond that just a little bit, right, we need charity work in Chicago. Mm-hmm. When I was growing up, my mom stopped letting me and my brother go anywhere because Jacksonville, Florida was one of the worst cities in America, okay? So it's charity work that's needed everywhere. But if you think as a black American that it immediately affords you, it puts you in a different place from an intellectual standpoint than people in Africa, you're sadly mistaken, okay? The richest black man on the planet lives in Africa. And I'd bet that the second, third, and fourth, and fifth might live in Africa as well. They just do a little better job of hiding their money than us black Americans do. Right? So it's an opportunity, this whole conversation, and I think this is a magnificent question, probably my favorite of the day. I think this whole conversation is just about continuing to educate yourself, right? And using education as your foundation and not assuming. Again, just remember the cognitive biases that we have about Africa. America has, maybe more now, right? America is positioning themselves as an advocate for Africa, but it's only because of the resources in the political battle, right? It's not because they truly have an interest in the continent. So all of the information that you've digested as a black American, right, has been given to you by a country that has no real, I don't know if you want to say respect or long-term value in a country outside of what that country can provide. And I think that was the scariest thing for me as a black man, when I realized that this country that I'm saying I'm from, I have a misconception about the country in itself. And again, apart for other reasons, that's one of the reasons why I make sure my kids go to Africa. My 4-year-old, she can distinguish Ghana from Africa, right? And it's a lot of people who can't distinguish Ghana from Africa as walking adults. And just because the foundation about Africa is education and not charity. You get what I'm saying? It's a very touching topic. We could have asked that and had a 60-minute conversation on that.
So in that vein, we are at the Cannes Lions International Festival of Creativity at Inkwell Beach at the Can Diversities Collectives Inkwell Beach. I just like saying it if you haven't noticed. We are at Inkwell Beach talking about Africa and Ghana. Okay. One thing that this festival is about, it's about storytelling, it's about creativity, it's about marketing, it's about advertising. The important part of it is, and I think you both were tapping into it, is the storytelling element of it. How are we shifting the narrative about what people see, do, and think about Africa so they understand the fullness and richness of it? You know, like with these marketers in the room, how do we get the marketers themselves? Like, how are we partnering with each other to build a new narrative about Africa?
Yeah, thank you for that.
Okay.
Well, here's the thing. I've said this on numerous occasions. I think I said it earlier on this very stage, which is that you know, it really starts with us as consumers. It starts with us as consumers first, before we are the executives and the creators of narratives, etc. And to piggyback off of what Sam said, it's like, what is your knowledge base about the continent and how are you going to advocate for it, right? Because it is the sell that is actually going to then create the strategies which allow for a change in narrative. Because if you're not able to sell it well, how are we going to change any narrative? You know, and so I don't look to external people to figure out how to create the change in the narrative. I do it. And actually start off from the very first question that you asked about the Apple keynote, you know, which is that, like, if I had gone up on that stage and not have understood the full value of Africa's contribution to music, I would not have played a song from Ghana, which then ricocheted into the popularity of a platform that created a category called Afrobeats, right? And so part of the narrative change for us is us as consumers changing the way that we talk about it, the way we think about it, and therefore it goes into the work. And then on top of that, you're important to the work. Absolutely. That's a broader conversation and maybe one we want to have a different time, but I believe that it is important for us to put ourselves into the work. You know, that we can't be generalists about this. And so be biased in your work, be biased in the narratives that you tell, and unapologetic about it. I certainly am.
I love it. You definitely are. You come with your authentic self, and I think that's what everyone loves about you so much. Sam, do you want to contribute to that?
Sure. I think, right, when I first got in business, it was such a scary place, right, because I knew the people who I had to solicit to probably didn't identify with who I was as a man, right? So I found myself in a place where I kind of got outside of who I was just to make a sale. And it was one of the most difficult things for me, right? So listen, I'm here with you. I understand how being unapologetic in your craft and what you present can be difficult, right? And I don't even know how to close that out, but that's just, it's a really difficult thing, and we all share that that battle. But to answer your question, right, about how marketers contribute, I think, like I said earlier, community, but it's partnership. Again, we have an amazing activation this December, and we're actively looking for partners, not just from a financial point, but people who share the same sentiment we share about the country. And it's a prime opportunity to get around other people who are very passionate about Africa, people who are doing great things, not just in America, but in the UK and all across the globe. And beyond that, you're going to have an amazing time. And then what's going to happen is you're going to go back and you're going to tell your friend, and next December they're going to come with you. And then 10 years ago, somebody's going to look at you the same way they look at Boz for what she did in 2017 and thank you for giving them that experience. I mean, probably 75% of the trips that I've taken back to Africa, I've made sure I invited someone. And they always, always, always deem it a life-changing, a life-altering experience for them, for the positive. And growing up in a community that I did, hey, a lot of guys like many of you, a lot of guys that I grew up with are no longer here, whether they're in prison, whether they're not living anymore, or whatever the case may be. But it was going back to Ghana, and it was taking that trip, right? KLM, sitting in Amsterdam on a 12-hour layover, right? Me and my little brother walking through the airport and actually getting to Africa and feeling what it felt like to walk off the plane. And that was, I'm telling you guys my age, but that was 18 years ago, right? And I feel it, right? And I want so many of you guys, she gets on me because earlier this year, I said it on Sway's show. I want to do that for 1 million people. I'm going to say it again. I'm going to double it. 2 million, right? We got to get everybody back to the continent. Whatever way we got to do it, we're going to do it, okay?
Okay, so I have a way.
When she starts scolding me.
Oh,
later.
you have a way?
I have a way. You know, it's all self-serving for me, of course.
2
But
million.
how many? What did you say? The last
2 million people.
2 million. Okay, so maybe not 2 million, but 20. So the Can Diversity Collective, you know, how we sort of changed the landscape of what it looks like in Can is we started with young people, and they story told about it. I mean, you know, they story tell differently from I do because they have a whole generation of folks who, I call it succession planning, right? How do we shift the narrative? You have to shift the narrative with the group who's going to tell the next group. So we bring 20 people to Can. Focus on me, Sam. I'm right here. Focus on me. Put that phone. No, I'm kidding. We bring 20 people to Can as a part of the Can Diversity Collective Ambassadors Program, and as a part of their remit, they have to story tell about what happened here to encourage other people to come. So I say we do like a Ghana Can Diversity Collective.
Yes.
And we take,
I love that.
and maybe we do, oh, okay, now let's keep it going. In the
Yes,
creative
iterating.
spirit of it, right?
Yeah.
We do a creative brief. You give a creative brief to our young creatives.
Yes.
They come up with a great campaign for the return to Ghana
Yes.
and say the top 5, 10, we take them back to Ghana for the return in December.
Yes, I love that.
Let's do it.
That is
Okay, he
brilliant.
said let's do it. And look, from an ad day from Martin is here. Rachel, go ahead.
Yes.
I put him on the spot. I'm sorry. I'm like, I'm like, you.
Exactly.
Oh, okay, okay, I can't see. Okay, my bad. But there are plenty of ad executives in the room. McKinney's in the room. You know, shout out to the folks. Londell
Yes.
McMillan, you know, can
Yes,
invest into the
Londell.
pot, you know, to the pot of doing
Yes.
a Ghana Can Diversity Collective where we get our young people because they're the ones, and I believe the children are our future.
Yes.
You know, they will lead the movement to get you to your 2 million, right? So let us do a creative campaign, and they're off doing a site visit. So when they come back and they have an assignment, they're going to be like, what happened?
Yeah.
What do we have to do to do a campaign
I love that.
to build and get people to go? And then you guys will choose the best campaign.
Yes.
And then
sounds
a
amazing.
strategy, and then we'll put it out there.
I
we,
love
We
that.
have media buying companies. So You heard it here, and it's on tape. We're
Yes.
going to put it out into the universe.
That's right. That's right. Thank you so much. Thank
Yes,
you.
exactly. And I think we have some bankers in the room that can help.
That's right.
Okay.
These two bankers.
Two bankers in
who
the
have
room.
promised to come to Ghana
who
in
have
December
promised
already.
to come to Ghana, so they're going to help underwrite the program. Oh, we're
Correct.
pulling
Yes.
this all
we
together.
need you to underwrite the program.
They're going to underwrite the program. We're pulling this
committed
strategy
already.
together right here. Am I doing too much? Somebody just tell me. You're doing too
No,
much.
you're doing too
No.
much. No.
Keep going.
Yes, keep
Lay
going.
it on thick.
So, okay, we have our commitment. I'm excited about that. Ghana 2023, done. All right,
Yes.
now we only have like 3 minutes and 45 seconds. I don't want to take too much. Did you have another comment before we ask the people?
Well, I just wanted to underline that point about that type of investment, and yes, I am putting you on the spot, because it is important for all of us, again, as we think about our budgets, as we think about the programs we're creating, the experiences we're creating, to expand to the continent of Africa and include that, right? Because often we think about campaigns, and it's like in the Americas and Europe. Maybe you get to South America, maybe you do Asia, but we never consider doing activations in Africa. And even bootstrapping what we have done for last December in creating experiences that go beyond just the general return on Treasure Island, making bespoke experiences, we find that we came here to this bespoke experience. And so if we created one in December, why are we not investing in that? Why are we not underwriting that, ladies? You know what I'm saying? So I would love for us to consider that as well.
I love it. So you hear the pitch that's happening right now. Okay, so any questions from the audience? You have 2 minutes. And my good friend, the Reverend Dr. Quick, is like, she has started another initiative on the stage. Okay, I'm sorry. But anybody, question? Yes, please.
No, I'm just trying.
Hi, Bozoma and Sam. Thank you for the amazing panel. My name's Andrea. I'm head of Africa.
Closer.
Hi, my name's Andrea. I'm director and head of Africa for a global network called Women in Marketing. I want to talk to you later about how we can bring in a panel of CMOs from Africa and the diaspora here. But my question was, in regards to the investment in Ghana, and we've got so many people coming in December to Ghana, how do we make sure that the everyday Ghanaian is not shut out from that? Because, you know, you go in December, Airbnb triples in price, the flights triple in price. Sorry?
We're having a hard time hearing you.
Okay,
so
sorry.
Yes, there we go. Yeah.
My question is, how do we make sure that the everyday Ghanaian isn't shut out from the investment that's going on in Ghana? December, the flights triple in price, the Airbnbs triple in price. Normal Ghanaians in the diaspora from London, for example, can't make that trip because the flights are so high. So the investment in Ghana is great. It's great for the country, but making sure the everyday Ghanaians in Ghana can have access to all that's going on, and also the Ghanaians in the diaspora. So just like in the UK, for example, there's certain areas that are being gentrified, shall we say. How do we make sure that the people who were originally there still get a part of what's going on?
Yeah. See, now this is a really controversial question because it's one of the dangers of narratives, you know? And we have to be really careful when we say those types of things, because it is not true that everyday people are not benefiting for the influx of tourism. Go to any country. Go to Singapore, right? And they'll tell you, look at their strategy, right? In increasing the per capita income of every Singaporean after they created a strategy for tourism. So we have to be really careful when we say that, because otherwise it stops us from actually coming, right? Because we start to think, oh, this is disenfranchising people. And so then people are like, oh, well, I don't want to contribute to that. So let me go back to Singapore then, you know? And so part of it is that think about the domino effect of what happens in society when you start to put money into the society. Yes, of course, we recognize the fact that there are going to be people who are at the very top who are going to benefit first. But we have to understand the trickle-down economics. Of course, I know sometimes that's a negative connotation, but it is something that is real. So what happens to the street vendors who are selling in the middle of the street when you have all these tourists come in? Yeah. What happens to the people who are, yes, Airbnb-ing their property, who never had that opportunity before? I can't even believe the Airbnb economy right now, by the way,
Yeah.
in Ghana.
Yeah.
And so, yes, of course, Airbnb as a San Francisco-based company is going to reap benefits, but so is the person who has built their place in Ghana or who decided to go next door to Benin real quick and give up their place for December so they can make some money. So I do want us to consider the larger impact of the economic situation that happens when you have the influx of people who come, and not just that it doesn't benefit everyone who is there.
And what I'll say is I've lived in Orlando for a very long time, right? My kids go to Disney World. I haven't been to Disney World in 5 years, all right? So why do I say that? Not every Ghanaian has an interest in experiencing what's going on in December. Actually, they want to get out of the way. I know people who live in Miami, and as soon as Memorial Day weekend comes, they leave town, right? So we also, like Bo said, we have to think about where did that narrative derive from? Yeah. I'd bet people who don't want you to go to Ghana. Because if you don't go to Ghana, right, if you create that narrative, I'm telling you, my dad's a business owner in Ghana. And when business is slow, not necessarily for us, but for businesses in Ghana, people don't get paid, right? They're going to commit their time to you because commitment is a part of the Ghanaian culture, but they don't get paid, right? So the more people come to Ghana, irregardless of the narratives that have been put out there, it helps the country. It significantly helps the country. So I'm going to give you a hug. I don't want you to think I'm on your head or nothing, but no, seriously, we got to get back. That's just the truth of the matter.
Okay, no problem. I'll make it quick. Everything you guys are talking about, it actually resonated with me very much. In 2008, I actually took a trip to Kenya, where I spent 40 days in Kenya with $20 in my pocket. It's a true story. And it's how I discovered my purpose in life. My nonprofit is called Project 54tour, TOUR.org. Everything that you just spoke about, you also, Adrian, in terms of what you guys want to do with implementing your programs, taking people to tours to Africa, that's exactly what my nonprofit was designed to create and do. I'm so committed to making a difference in Africa that I will be the first one publicly in front of everyone will donate $25,000 to your initiative if you guys are serious about actually making a difference, because in 2008, I discovered my purpose in life. I'm an advertising guy who worked in the business for over 30 years. And what I discovered was completely opposite of what the media was portraying about what people in Africa really want. They don't want a handout, they want a hand up. They want to be empowered to actually do for themselves. And my nonprofit was designed to do that. Put the camera on people who are trying to make a difference in Africa, but also here in the United States, that actually empower us. So I'm making a public commitment right now. If Adrian, Sam, and Boz, if you guys are interested, I got your back, because I know that what you're talking about is a real vision.
That's beautiful.
Thank you for that donation. I do know your phone number, and I will be calling. You guys, please give a round of applause for this fascinating conversation, very powerful conversation. Bozoma St. John, Sam Barrington. Please thank you for this day of disruption. It's been amazing. We have two more panels to go for another day of disruption.
Ta copine, elle pense que je suis préposé aux chaises, elle vient me voir à chaque fois.
Ouais, je crois, ouais. C'est pas ma copine, mais...
Ah, yeah, I don't know.
Les gars, c'est à vous le sac à l'entrée ou pas? Il y a marqué one way. Ouais. Je pense à les jeunes, si vous pouvez le décaler, c'est cool.
C'est mon nouveau métier.
Pour le prochain qui me fixe les droits, toi, il y avait quelqu'un qui doit venir là. Pourquoi? Sauf c'est ta place, gros.
Ouais, non, c'est bien. Je me mets à l'aise.
Non, là, il y avait un sac.
Ah, là, c'est bon, ouais. C'est bon de me mettre en travers, sinon je suis sur les câbles.
Hello guys, how are you?
Hello.
For tonight, who's on tonight?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
So what we're gonna do, I'm gonna give you the DJ rundown. We have a mixer.
Ah, yes.
That we're gonna bring. For the sound,
For the sound, it's not me. It's my.
We have the video team.
Yeah, it's a video.
team?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Alright. Ah, il y aura peut-être
Where can I put this out of your way?
Ouais, je crois, ouais.
Sorry?
Where can I put this where it's not in your way?
On this bag maybe for now.
Okay.
Yeah. Ok.
Thank you.
C'est bon.
Ah ouais.
C'est celui de Andy, non?
Je sais pas. Mec, t'es bidon là.
Je crois.
You guys got some gas tape here?
In the yeah, this one.
Le
Le tiroir, je sais pas comment on dit tiroir. Yeah,
Yes.
that's one.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Where's that?
À côté des Andes, c'est parfait.
Ouais, je pense que
On va mettre deux gars au son, on va laisser les autres se démerder. On va laisser les deux là-haut.
Ray, can you?
Goldborn.
Okay, perfect. So, I.
Are you going to introduce us?
Yes, I'm
Okay,
going to
cool.
introduce you, and then your mics will be on the chairs
Yeah.
as well, and there's water
Gentlemen,
next to you.
bueno. Ça va? Ça va bien. Merci. Merci beaucoup.
There will also be just a countdown clock on the conference monitor in front of you, so
Okay.
you'll see how much time you have.
All right. Do we have an hour and half an hour?
You have the
An
full
hour,
hour.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Let
okay.
me introduce you.
I think that's enough.
You're okay?
Let's see if we can pull this back.
Sure. Maybe Ray on the end just to help moderate some of the questions. Hello, hello, everyone. We are going to get started with our next session. If everyone can please have a seat, we'll get started with our next session shortly. Okay, I think this one will be yours.
Yeah, I'm sorry. The sunglasses I have to ask you.
Still wear sunglasses? I do have mine.
Nah, you can put them on. They're gonna get ugly first, but that's how it's going. You can put them on.
Organizing my things better. And I do have sunglasses. Yay! Yay! Yeah, that's good. But the sun is much better.
All right. I think they're going to introduce us first, and then where is she? This is not after she kind of disappeared on us. Oh, I thought you were going to introduce us. Oh, okay. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. All right, come on in. Come on in, folks. We won't hurt you. Come have a seat. My name is Ray Goldborn. I'm the EVP, Executive Vice President, Media Sales at BET, Paramount. And up here we have, from my left, Kirk McDonald, the CEO of Group M. For those of you who are not familiar, Group M is one of the major agencies, holding companies in the world.
Only about North 16, America, though. Let's be clear. Don't give me all the whole thing.
No, it's the world. He's CEO of North America. About $16 billion under management. About 7,000 plus almost employees. And Kirk is founding member of Becca. All around, avant-garde, innovator, bad guy, superstar, former global marketer. You name it, Kirk McDonald, it leads innovation and all the things that are necessary to keep a major holding company in North America all on target. So, Kirk, please give a round of applause to Kirk. Kirk McDonald, please. All right. And then right beside Kirk with the, you can't miss her. She is a wave maker. She's a superstar. I've known her for about 30 years, 20-some years at least.
Neither of you guys are that old.
I started too, Bob. So, AC Eggleston Bracey is president of Unilever North America. She's also CEO of Personal Care Unilever North America. She is an innovator, starred, of course, The Crown, responsible for the Crown Act, which is about really making sure that your natural hair is not used to discriminate against you. Probably in about almost 25 different states, it's been passed as law. She is responsible for pretty much most of Unilever's business, and she is a superstar. Please welcome AC Eggleston Bracey. And of course, my CEO, Paramount Global CEO, I've known him now for 20 years, some like that. I started too. Bob Backus has been our CEO for a decade plus. He runs all streaming strategy, global revenue streams, you name it, for Paramount Global. He is responsible for thousands or 13,000 employees globally. He just came back from Rome. Of course, you've all seen the last Top Dog, Top Gun, and now he's doing, what is it now, Mission Impossible 7 out of Rome. So please welcome one of the leading global streaming service CEO in the world, Bob Backus, Paramount.
Thank you, Ray.
Thank you. So I see some folks out here. Esther, good to see you. Byron Allen, good to see you. Janine, a lot of great talent out here. We're going to leave a couple of minutes at the end for some questions, so feel free to ask. But let's jump on into it. Kurt, AC, Bob, it's been 3 years since George Floyd. Brands have pledged a lot of things. Some brands have not pledged, but we have the good guys, we have the bad guys, we have some folks who are moving the movement along by actions, by certain key pronouncements in some cases. But really, what do you think is the responsibility of your brand to help in this mission fight as we move forward into the 21st century? I know, Kurt, you speak differently because you've got a portfolio of brands. Bob and AC, you've got a brand or several different brands, but you speak differently. I'd love to hear your different perspectives. So first, what is it that you're doing, and what is it you'd like to do? And we'll start with you, Bob, and then we'll go to AC and Kurt.
Sure. Well, you know, George Floyd was certainly a moment that can't be understated, but for us, our journey around inclusion has been one that started years ago. For me, it started working for a guy named Tom Freston, who was a big believer in what has come to be known as DE&I. And it's certainly a focus of our organization today. And it is for a very simple reason, which is you could argue it's the right thing to do, but at the core, it's good for business because as Paramount, we serve diverse audiences on a global basis, and therefore, our ability to do so is enhanced by having a diverse workforce in front of the camera, behind the camera, creatively, commercially, transactionally, et cetera. So, you know, that's how we look at it. And I think, I'm sure we talk about, we've done a lot of good work in the area. We have more work to do. But if you think about our company, we're one of the few companies in the world, or certainly in the U.S., that has over 50% female board. We have an SLT that is a little over 20% ethnically diverse, a little around 40% female. If you look at our employee base writ large, it's about 40% ethnically diverse and about just under 50% female. So, you know, we've done a lot of work. And again, we think it just fundamentally makes sense for our business.
Thank you. AC.
Hello. If we're real, George Floyd was not the catalyst, it was the tipping point, okay? Because what you saw from George Floyd was America, the world got to see what so many Black Americans and underserved groups had experienced. So as you think about what our responsibility is, and I want to almost say ditto to what Bob said, it's about using that tipping point to accelerate what we already started, right? And so, you know, that's of course what we've done at Unilever. And what you see companies distinguish themselves, those that made platitudes based on George Floyd, or those that actually took action to accelerate what they'd already been doing. Because what you need in this fight and effort is consistency. You know, I remind people that Black Americans in particular, our genesis of America started 400 years ago as slavery. So if we look at the time that we've been here in America, 60% of that we were slaves. 25% of that we didn't have civil rights. It's only 15% of the time that we've been here that we have actually been considered equal in terms of the law. So the work that we have to do, we did not get into this situation overnight. We will not get out of it. So it's not like George Floyd is a one and done. You need to set a commitment based on the business case, as Bob talked, which you believe deeply in. America is changing, the world is changing. It's the Browning. America in particular, 40% of people today are people of color. So if you're gonna have a business that's going to exist, you have to have a business that is relevant for the people of color. So back to the tipping point. So for us, it's all about continuing the journey. At Unilever, we aspire to be the most diverse and inclusive company in the world. And so we've taken actions for females of gender parity, which we've achieved. Okay, we've certainly done that in North America. My leadership team has 40% people of color. So we're taking actions. And since George Floyd, we've actually celebrated the presence of blacks in leadership by almost 7%. So it's all about taking actions and using it as a catalyst, the tipping point, using it as the tipping point to accelerate, not as the beginning of something, and each and every year making consistent progress, given its centuries that we are of oppression that we're trying to unravel.
Thank you. Kurt.
So I want to compliment both of these business leaders for the work they're doing. Agents and agencies act as enablers or an intermediary often between what a brand needs to accomplish and the work itself. So our role is to, one, make sure that we live up to the same commitments that we're asking our clients to, but also show them a pathway there. So I'm very proud of the work that we've done, and I love the description AC's described, which is that George Floyd was a tipping point because the moment was so visual, so emotive, so in your face that at least the conversations that happened all after that all had to have some similar, if not exact same perspective on what that meant, and then some difficult conversations happened and allowed work that had started to accelerate for sure. Decisions about putting more diversity in the boardroom, more gender and ethnic diversity at the management table, to make sure that you start measuring all of these promises, measuring them to a standard that you know is scalable, something that can actually sustain itself over time. All of those things came out of the moment. I truly think that steps here are still holding ourselves accountable for those things. Similar to both Paramount and Unilever, we've made commitments across all of WPP and Group M to our behavior around our leadership and staff, but it's the simple things too that you've got to do, right? Removing unconscious bias in your hiring practice. For us, you hear about us talking about this work with the ad counts around tier the paper ceiling. It's a simple step of removing college degree requirements for you to actually hire an entry-level staff. Turns out the unconscious bias in that system is that you end up hiring more people from the same universities. You can't diversify the entry-level workforce. By not doing that, you then claim to have a pipeline problem when you're looking for middle management and senior leaders of diverse backgrounds. Little things like that are all the steps that need to be made along the way, because it isn't going to be one single thing that makes this work. It's a collection of actions and a true change in behavior. We stood up for our clients the Media Inclusion Initiative that said, don't just target the fact that America's browning, but target the creators of content, making sure that black creators, diverse creators also themselves would see the kind of investment to be able to invest in their properties and grow. And we set that as sort of a flag out there, and we asked clients to step up and stand behind it. Unilever and others have stepped up to that and said, not only do we want to hit that mark, we've set higher standards for ourselves around what we think our company is going to do. And as Bob described, I love the fact that these things are not just being done for social good, but they're being done for business good. Because if you can make it make business sense, it stays making sense. That's the deal.
What a wonderful answer. Here's what I'd put in front of folks. I said yesterday to Mark Pritchard, that's a very logical explanation for what's in front. But there's a lot of emotion in there too, because you're talking about people, you're talking about culture, you're speaking about backgrounds, association over many years. How do you deal with that portion of it, Bob, knowing full well that the future is bright, but you can't really go back, and you have folks who are not prepared necessarily to handle the future because they don't have the competencies, whether culturally or otherwise? How do you deal with that? I'd love to hear your thoughts, AC, Bob, and Kirk.
Yeah, sure. So I say a couple things. I think it starts with commitment, and again, a firm rationale for that commitment, which is it makes business sense. Because as Kirk said, you know, if it didn't ultimately make business sense, it will be hard to perpetuate. But it does, and we firmly believe that. So it starts with a commitment. And we're big believers, maybe because we're a media company, but in communications. So once you understand what you want to do, you have to have the team understand it and then put objectives in place, because I don't know who invented the saying, what gets measured gets done. So this is a similar kind of thing. You want to understand what your objectives are, and then you go to work on specific areas, whether it's in front of the screen, a lot of work we're doing around content for change, and we can come around and talk about that, whether it's about understanding what's going on in the production process, and we developed a partnership with Salesforce to use their software in a obviously bespoke way to understand what was actually going into our productions. And by the way, we've opened that up to the industry. And then I could go on and saying, how we're monitoring other aspects of the business. But it's objective, communications, process, measurements. In many respects, it's not like any other business problem. It's like you got to go at it in a systematic way. And again, as we've done that, we've certainly moved the needle some. Again, I wouldn't say we're done. But it can have a real impact. And it's also working for business. I can tell you, you mentioned Mark Pritchard. I mean, I know Mark, I'm going to see him tomorrow, and part of the reason he does business with us is what we're doing on the screen and off the screen. And you know, and Lewis knows, and I've built a great relationship on that. So that's how we think about it. We really do, even though it's a social issue, we look at it like any other business challenge and moving an organization forward and building culture, et cetera. And I'd say one other thing, as an example, because we're at Cannes Lion, and Cannes Lion is the festival of creativity, but creativity is related to advertising. So if you look at our ad sales force, I think in the last 2 years, we've changed the way we brought people into the company. What we call SSEs and planners. We've now brought through 4 different cohorts, so we set them up as groups that come in, 150 people, including changing the requirements to bring them in. They don't all look the same on paper. And it's significantly transformed what our ad sales force looks like. Hasn't made it all the way up to the top yet, because it's cohorts of people coming in, but you're talking about 150 people on our ad sales force. And by the way, I think I probably shouldn't say this because I'm probably wrong, but I actually don't think any of them have left. The retention on it's been very strong, and I'm sure the promotion on it will be as well.
Beautiful. Thank you. Ace.
I think what your question is really an important one. And what I heard your question is it just about the fact and about the business case?
Absolutely.
And for me, I liken it to any change. What's it take to drive a change? And I say it's your head and it's your heart and it's your soul. If I think about your soul, it's belief in the mission, in the purpose of what we're trying to do. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to change the business culture. So you have to believe. Unilever is a company of purposeful brands, of Dove, of Shea Moisture. We believe in brands with purpose. The company is one of purpose, so we declare that purpose and mission, so we believe in it. Then your heart is you have to feel it. And back to the point of being at the Cannes Festival, that's where making sure you've got authentic, real representations of black people, and not just black people, brown people, LGBTQ people, people that may not be in your sphere. You've got to see, you've got to feel, you have to have a horse in the race. That's why George Floyd's murder was such an eye-opener, because you felt it, you saw it. Then you got to have the case for it, because we are talking about the numbers in the business. But I do agree that not any one of those alone is sufficient. You need them all, right? So that's why the work on creating authentic content, the work we did during the aftermath of George Floyd's murder around courageous conversations, where we got to tell our personal stories. Got to tell my story. What is it like to come in this corporate America with a costume and an armor on every day? What does it feel like? That creates heart. And then, of course, it's the business case, because our businesses will not exist if we don't create the connectivity. So the short answer is yes, it is about more than the numbers. If not, we can't drive change, and any other change has been about more than the facts. The civil rights movement was about more than the facts. And I can think of so many more that are about more than the facts.
Before you go, Kurt,
Oh
you
no,
know,
I'm not going after that. After Bob and her, I'm not going.
all right, I'll have an interlude for you then. So check
you need
this out,
another question.
right?
I'm not trying to go after that.
Yeah, that's too hard to follow. But before you go, you know, you both run enormous companies with diversified employees, but majority of which are white folks from the general market. How do you deal with that emotions where folks are feeling that if one group is winning, the other group is losing? Because that's a real thing, right? And we shouldn't just disregard that, because the connection is important. It's important for you, Bob, with your employees, Kurt, AC. So how do you deal with that from the perspective of the logical business case, but at the same time understand that you need to change, but also you need to incorporate some of the past with some of the present as you go to the future?
So this is where I think it is critically important that you, and it tests whether or not you believe or have DE&I policies and understand what it really means to do that. And the reason I use DE&I, where I rarely ever use it in that order, is because if you don't, like Bob said earlier, start with the I, which is, are you truly creating an inclusive environment? You never get to the D. Because see, D before the I is a false metric, and eventually people don't retain.
Smart. Yeah.
They churn out of the organization. So you think you're solving D, but you have not solved for people sitting in the organization. Bob said it well. AC said it before. The way you make sure that no one feels left behind, no group, and then you can talk about any group, is that you speak about an inclusive culture. And a culture that recognizes that we don't exist until the new person comes in. And every new person that comes on board contributes equally to the culture, to the person that's there 25 years. And if the 25-year veteran and the person who's on day 3 both feel equal, so I, inclusive environment, feel that they've been given equitable opportunity for voice, pay reward, experiences to be felt, opportunity to contribute. Diversity then happens as a result of that. And if you go IED in your philosophy with your people department and the way you communicate it to your teams, that's how no group starts feeling, but why are you giving them more attention than me? Because they recognize that we collectively are actually ones making the change and doing it different. I'm not telling you it's easy. This is a journey, and we're on that with our teams, but that's how we are trying to get 7,000 people to feel like one body, one group, one movement, while still retaining all the individuality that my Shalom group, my AAPI group has, that my Black ERGs have. Everyone should have their own sensibility, but still believe that they're included in a single environment that is welcoming of the new.
Yeah, and I would just add a few things. I want to say, like, triple that emotion. And in that, to add, we have Tish Archie-Oliver here, who is for Unilever's head of diversity, equity, inclusion,
Tish.
and belonging. So I wanted to call her out. She's doing incredible work. But I want to add to Kurt 3 things. One is the B. So he talked about the I. That is, we can't just show up as numbers. It's not going to work because friction happens, not magic. So when you get representation without the feeling of inclusion, that I'm a part of the conversation and that I belong here, that I'm not a number. And while I call out Tish because of the belonging, she's really brought that belonging piece to Unilever, that I belong. Not just that I'm in the conversation. This is my Unilever. I belong. It's a game changer, and you have people working together. Number 2, back to the earlier conversation, how do you deal with the win, you win, I lose? There's 2 things in that. One is growth mindset. We talk about that in the business all the time. It's rewarding in everything you do, expansion. It's about a growth mindset. We have to do that in our businesses today. It is harder than ever to fight for growth. So we have to be expansive. And that's the same when we think about people. The other thing, it's about being related. So I think the women's movement has made more progress than the ethnic diversity movement. Why is that? Because men who own the power have girls that they don't want to grow up in this world with the same level of oppression that was accepted. So they fought for the change and were included. So how do we change that for all people? And we see that happen with the LGBTQ plus movement. It's my neighbor, it's my friend, it's my brother, it's my sister. So we need to create relatedness so that it doesn't feel like it's about me, it's about them, it's about us. So I think those are the things we have to do. Your mic drop on the I plus the B, the growth mindset and the relatedness. So this is our world, not their world or, you against me.
Beautiful, love it. Bob, love to hear your thoughts on that, please.
So I agree with everything that's been said, but I would add to that it's part of a broader thing, which is it's often said today the only constant is change. And that is a statement that doesn't only apply to the topic we're talking about. It applies to business writ large. Our jobs are to lead our respective companies through a changing environment. And so that almost definitively means the status quo won't perpetuate itself. The organization is going to change. And the reason we're changing the companies, and you can use words like transformation and all that stuff, it's fundamentally, talk about your growth point, but it's we want to make the companies stronger. We want them to thrive in the 21st century. For us, for probably everyone in this room, is affected by the transition of consumer behavior and media consumption and linear versus streaming and all that. That has tremendous implications for our companies. And it means that we need to make sure people understand what we're trying to achieve, back to that point, and understand that we want to transform to be stronger. And in that transformation, there will be change. I don't want to call it winners and losers, but we certainly move resources around from this kind of resource to that kind of resource. And ultimately, it's the ones that are stay behind, i.e. stay with the company, that need to be focused on this transition. Because there will be, inevitably, and you just read the headlines, there are people dislocated by change in general. Forget about DE&I. And the important are the people that continue through it and drive forward. Because they're part of making the company stronger. They have to understand what we're doing and help carry the torch in general and including with respect to DE&I. Because that's what it's all about. This is not the only change we're managing. Our job is to manage change and bring the workforce along.
Beautiful. Let's switch it up a little bit and talk about investments. There's no real opportunity that's going to open up for anyone without real investment in infrastructure, whether it's human infrastructure or otherwise. You're a content leader. You are a content leader / procurer. You have all of those things opened up. Let's talk a little bit about how you view the notion of investing in either black or LGBTQ targeted opportunities or owned. And I'd love to hear, you've got Tyler Perry as a huge part of our Paramount and other African-American procurers and content creators. You've done lots of different partnerships. Kurt, you lead a global North American entity that does that all the time. Would love to hear your different perspective in how you move those investments to either black-owned, black-operated, and what are some of the criteria that you use in order to differentiate that, other than just like it's good?
Well, go back to the fundamental point that we serve diverse audiences, including black audiences, right? Point one. Point two is, to do that well, we believe, and I think it has been proven correct, that you need diverse teams. Point three is go to the creative side. So as we looked at it, we said, where are there opportunities? You mentioned Tyler Perry. Scott Mills and I did the Tyler Perry deal. It was Scott's idea, but as we looked at it and as we wanted to be successful serving audiences, we said, this is an outstanding creative partner. In order to align it, because he was working with another company, so we need to align him with our company, we had to commit certain resources, i.e. invest, a size of a slate, et cetera, a multi-year commitment. But it was a commitment that we believed in based on understanding the audience we were going after. That's one example. much more recent examples when we set up BET Studios. And as part of that, we said we're going to offer the marketplace a new model. We're not just going to write a check. We're going to offer an opportunity for, in this case, black creators to own equity in part of a larger operation. And we thought that was differentiating for us, and it would serve to attract talent, which in turn would help drive our success. And we're at the early stages of that because we only set that up, what, a year ago, 2 years ago? Maybe longer than that, but it's totally worked. And it goes back to thinking, what are you trying to achieve? And based on that, where do you think you should invest? And then over time, how do you gauge if your investment is successful? That's the other thing, but it's part of it. You have to invest for success.
Thank you. Kirk?
Sure. So again, I applaud the approach Bob's taken. When we went out and stood up the Media Inclusion Initiative, which you may have seen in press, and it spoke about a 2+% pledge by marketers, advertisers of their investment or their advertising dollars intentionally now invested. It was only part of the program. Remember, for us, we started this. As AC said, George Floyd was a tipping point, but we've had programs back as early as 2017, 2018, 2019. There were new majority ready coming into and out of the census. Let's actually prepare our marketers to understand. New majority ready formed a coalition of advertisers who wanted to understand what the browning of America meant. That was followed by tools like multicultural marketplaces, which allowed for marketers to buy specific audiences in easy to buy ways. One of the frictions in buying media is the ability to find audiences efficiently, followed up by programs like the Media Inclusion Initiative. And the 2+% pledge said, look, for existing owned media properties that were owned by blacks, or in the case of it now, its evolution into diverse owned, we want to make sure dollars go to those owners, but it also had in it a Diverse Voices Accelerator, specifically targeted at black voices. The Black Voices Accelerator program recognizes that the structure of a media company like a Paramount or other media companies in our space, whether you want to look at Allen Media Group, right, or you want to look at Univision in the Latina space, you want to look at Black Enterprise, all of those are owned entities, but in the future, you may have individual voices, individual creators that are coming up through other methods, and we wanted to make sure that dollars got intentionally spent with them, knowing that they should get investment so that they could grow what they're doing and keep telling their stories. We recognize there's an importance to who tells what story to what audience, and it's not, again, one versus the others. It's not a game of one way is better than the other. All should exist, and we have to be very intentional about making sure those dollars go that way. So as we stood that up, everyone that committed to the 2+% pledge also got themselves involved in our Diverse Voices Accelerator, making sure that, again, we are getting intentional dollars all the way down to individual social media contributors that want to make sure their stories get out there and told as well.
Wonderful. Before I go to AC, on the prior question, how does the NBC Universal deal fit into that model that you just described? I'd love to hear that, Kurt.
The question is to me about the NBC Universal deal?
And how it fits into what you just described. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that perspective.
Be specific. Which deal are we talking about?
Okay, excuse me. The one where they're going to commingle and sell the African-American content.
You mean the Group Black deal?
The Group Black deal.
Got it.
Excuse me.
So no worries. So for those who have not read the press, it was announced this week, and I don't have much more information than you do other than what's in the press.
Thank you.
As I understand, between Group Black, another black-owned media property, they've gotten into an arrangement with NBC Universal to make sure that they will have an ability to represent inventory of content that is targeted against black audiences. And as I read it, some major portion or the majority of the revenue from that goes back into Group Black, and Group Black structure is about making sure that money gets eventually disseminated down to creators. I think it's not an either or. That was the point I made earlier, right? So I think if we said that was the only way we're going to work forward, that would be as egregious and as wrong as imagining that what we were doing right before without having intentionality was good. So this too is good. I do think that it shouldn't be, we have to be careful that we don't compare all of these things all the time and use that as a reason to imagine, for example, that BET, under its current ownership, should not also participate in these types of programs. What we want to make sure is happening is that we are not ignoring the challenges faced by black ownership or diverse ownership, or black creators and diverse creators in their ability to get their stories told, and more importantly, distributed at enough scale where they can actually monetize and then be able to reinvest in their business.
Wonderful. Thank you. Welcome. AC?
Your question was about investment, which is, I think, is complicated. So one, you have to have the intention. We keep talking about the business case. It is so obvious that you need to overinvest in black and brown. If I think about Unilever's and our beauty business in particular, all of the growth in beauty is coming from black and brown consumers. I'm more specific in my category. 60% of the growth is coming from black and brown consumers. We consume more than average because we're into our beauty. There are unique needs for melanin skin and textured hair. And because of that, they disproportionately consume our category. So we have to overinvest. The other thing is that black and brown, the data, no matter how you slice it, are influencers. So beyond the consumption that we have, it's we influence others. So, you know, I always say spin to the business. The investment case is very clear. So the intention is there to overinvest. But then you have to ask yourself, so why isn't that happening today? What are the barriers to that? And I think there are a couple of things. One is the capability, making sure people know how to plan and et cetera, to reach in terms of investment. It's not just in media, it's in the right authentic content. Because if you're investing in media and the content's not right and it's not resonating, that's not gonna work. So you gotta have the capability. That's where the training, demanding of agencies, our media partners, et cetera, to not take content that's meant for one audience and place it in media that's meant for another. So there's a whole capability piece that's a disconnect that we have to work on. And then the third is operationalizing it so it's not a one and a done, which is what these gentlemen are talking about here, is the whole ecosystem. Tyler is an ecosystem to create and perpetuate that content. And that's in front of the camera, behind the camera, having the right diversity of media available so that the investment goes to where we intend it to go, right? So I think that's why I say it's complex. We have to have the intention, but we have to build that whole ecosystem with the right capability and operationalizing it to really create the breakthrough. And we're still in that journey. Some of it is changing mindsets to solidify more broadly that intention, but we are building the capability in the ecosystem to operationalize it and sustain it.
Wonderful. Thank you. You know, we're winding down. It seems like the hour is going by quickly. I'd like to take two questions from the audience. If, I see folks are jumping in up already. Come on, if you could come on up, and I'll give you my mic. But just two questions, and then we'll wind down a little bit. First of all, what's your name? Please.
Hi, I'm Monique with TED Talks. My question is, I want to lift up under the hood about the action portion and equity. So one of the things that I want to go beyond is just equity and pay. One thing that really helped me from growing with my career was sponsorship. So understanding how to navigate being in those rooms where we want a seat at the table, because they'll let us into the table sometimes, but they won't necessarily show us how to operate and have a voice. And also really thinking about how do you elevate your skill set when you're trying to accelerate within your career. How are you all looking to implement sponsorship, action-oriented ways for people of color, black people, to understand how to operate in these spaces? Because it goes beyond just being in the spaces. You have to really know how to navigate it.
Terrific question. Bob?
Well, I think there's really a multifaceted answer to that. It goes back to the notion of inclusion and the value of having diverse voices in the room as you search for great creative answers, commercial answers, etc. I say in the room because that is fundamental. You need to have, and I'm a big believer in listening. I hate rooms where the senior people do all the talking. You've got to listen to what people think in order to collect the information, and that includes diverse voices. The second thing I would say, and this is super important, is ultimately it is also on you, which is when you get in a room, you need to be prepped for being in the room. You need to do the thinking. You need to have a point of view. I love to hear people's point of view, but if you can't explain why you believe what you believe, that's a missed opportunity. So it goes to, there are hustlers and not hustlers out there, and it goes to the value of, dare I say, being in the office. Like, people need to invest in themselves. When I talk to people, and we've been fairly successful at bringing people back to the office. We've adopted hybrid, 2 days a week, et cetera, which I think is a good balance. But when we talk about it, I'm saying, you're not doing it for me. Believe it or not, you're doing it for you. Because social interaction helps you learn, and learning makes you stronger and makes you contribute. So sure, we have to give the opportunities. We have to bring the right people in the door. Goes to the ad sales example I gave. We've got to put the people in the room, but they've got a responsibility too. They've got to invest in themselves. They've got to read. They've got to learn the business. They've got to talk to people. Building networks is important. And there are networks out there, and people embrace it. Mentorship is something we're doing. But I just want to stress, it's not all on us. It really is a two-way street. We've got to open the door, but you've got to work on it too. And as you do, great things can happen and do happen.
Thank you. Ace?
Oh, I have a lot to say about this topic. What a great question. What a great question. So there's three things that come to mind to me. One, I have a question for you. Who thinks sponsorship and mentorship are the same? Nobody. Okay. So I completely agree with you that I have benefited more from sponsors than I have mentors. And there are people that put me in my position because they chose to put me in their position and they took action. I've had lots of people that have given me advice, but I've had a select few people that believed in me and said, this is where I see you. Not just, here's the next role, here's where I see you. And they made active changes to put me in these breakthrough roles that were game changers for me. I can tell you, 5 of those roles that made a huge difference because of a sponsor. So I think you're right on. The second part of your question in my statement is around your question was, how are you sponsoring? And I think what's really important is how I sponsor and the way Bob sponsors has to be different. And you say, why does it have to be different? People have different kind of expectations of us. When I come into a room, people are afraid that I'm going to populate everybody with black people. Okay. The way Bob can show up, he can be active sponsoring a black person, and they see that as, oh, there must be something special about this black person. They see me do that, they're like, she's trying to get all her friends in the room. Okay, so the way I have to show up as a sponsor is I show up, you hear, with this head, heart, soul, with the business case, what the person's facts are, the way I have to sponsor. And I'm a very, very active sponsor and champion for underserved people, deserving underserved people in my organization. So I can tell you, he talked about the Crown Act, how I sponsored. When I joined Unilever in 2018, Dove, which is the brand that has pioneered the Crown Act, was a company and a brand all about beauty inclusivity. But I showed up and said, beauty inclusivity, let's look at what that means for black women. And so I showed up as a sponsor of that movement, brought in an agency as a sponsor of that movement. Not me, but an agency to come in and say, how do we do this? And then continue to actively sponsor that movement. So today, we have 23 states, as he said, who have passed some kind of anti-race discrimination legislation. I actively sponsored that movement. And how did I do that? It wasn't about me. It was about extending Dove's mission, understanding the highest consumption group, and then understanding barriers to beauty inclusivity and being able to use my position to actively sponsor that movement. If I weren't in my position, that movement could not have happened because it took a lot of change. That's an example of sponsorship. The third thing I would say is making sure you have a model that systematizes sponsorship. So I always use a model called GRASP, to get a grasp on diversity. G, set goals. R is recognition, recognize and reward, recognition. A is active advocacy. All of us can be that. S is sponsorship, sponsorship, sponsorship. And P is have a plan. So recognizing sponsorship is important, not just mentorship. So well said. Those are my thoughts.
Your question was so good I'd take my glasses off. +1 to everything you've heard. Also, I want to applaud those that are looking to find scale ways to do this as well, too. Adrian, Inkwell, group black people that are sponsored here. Have you guys seen these young people around here? The Clan Collective, these young men. This is Alexander right here, standing right over here in this shirt. Y'all see that dude? He's at a HBCU. Him and Miles stopped me on the street. Miles, put your hand up. And they stopped me on the street. Now, if we do more programs like this, they're going to get exposure. Now, they walked up and introduced themselves, and I remembered their names. And that matters more to me than they understand, because I know they're the future leaders. We are part of an organization called BECA, Black Executive C-Suite Executive Alliance, right? What we stood up was, we got together and said, how do we make sure that we're preparing future leaders for our jobs, even as we're thinking about board seats, et cetera, and things like that? And what can we do to actually actively invest in the community of leaders that are coming behind us and give them these kind of tips so that they don't have to actually stumble over the stuff we stumbled over? That's all it is sometimes. It's just don't make the mistake I made the first time I got in the room, either with or without a sponsor. And when possible, I'm going to remember Alex and Miles, because if the opportunity exists for me to sponsor and I don't sponsor them, that would be a shameful thing. But that's the work that needs to get done, and everyone can be active in that one. Everyone can participate. Go meet every single future leader in this room. Every person who's in this room is a future leader. Raise your hand now, either of BECA or the Can Collective. And if you're an executive in this room and you don't walk out of here having met one of them and said hello, and given them your direct cell phone number and email for you to be in touch with them, then you're not really committed to it either. You're all talk. All right? But that's the kind of work that needs to get done. See, I'd take my glasses off for that.
Wonderful.
Because that was
and I'm going to call out a couple of the folks that I didn't. We talked about Tiffany up here, Mr. Byron Allen, Pam Kaufman, Dario. You see them all around here. Go get their names and numbers and hit them up. All right? Not for money, but for future, all right? You got Ed Fogarty in the back. Those are the folks that you need to talk to, right? Steve Ellis. You got Michelle. You go
Michelle
find them.
Gee, you go, girl.
Go find them.
Michelle's hiring.
Right? You got Londell. He runs Prince's managing director of Prince's Estate. Go find them.
And y'all don't play. Byron Allen's right in the front row. Byron can give y'all a job just to give you a job.
I mean, you can ask Byron
right,
for a loan, but everybody else you ask for their numbers. All right? This is important. I think you'll all agree with me. This has been an awesome, wonderful panel. Kirk McDonald, CEO, North America Group M. A.C. Eggleston, President of Unilever USA, CEO, Personal Care, and Bob Backus, Global CEO, Paramount. Please give them a round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray.